Welcome to join us at 2025 International Climate Action Forum, hosted by Taiwan Carbon Solution Exchange and Taiwan Stock Exchange. With the agreements on the new collective quantified goal for climate finance and Article 6 under the Paris Agreement reached at COP29, countries around the world are accelerating efforts to achieve net zero emission. Today's forum is aimed to bring together organizations, industry experts, and key stakeholders to discuss pressing global climate issues, enhance networking, and explore opportunities for future collaboration.
And we all know that from the conclusion of COP29 of Article 6 in Paris Agreement last year, the carbon credits is very important in the near future for the governments to achieve the net zero goal. According to the February 25 report of World Federation of Exchanges, the WFE, and we all know that the retirement of voluntary carbon credits has reached to 119 million tons of CO2 equivalent, marking a historical high and demonstrating the market's continuous momentum. By the end of next year, we will begin our pilot phase in the emission trading scheme, or called the TWSE. It's the pilot phase, and it's also the milestone in the history of our journey to net zero.
From ADB, we would like to emphasize how we're going to add the value. First, of course, through the financing, we provide our own finance to assist our members and partners by providing loans, technical assistance, grants, guarantee, and equity investment to promote social and economic development. We will also mobilize funds from other resources to maximize the development impacts of our assistance. And also, we would like to follow through the knowledge sharing to focusing on the practical value will fit the local condition and providing advisory service, identifying lessons, and replicating good practice. And the last but not the least, we are going to through the partnerships to facilitating policy dialogue and collaborating among diverse partners and stakeholders. From ADB, we have significantly scaled up our climate finance portfolio as part of our commitment to address climate change in Asia and the Pacific. So I want to give a short highlight of what our investment financing is highlighting. So our climate finance portfolio is administration through different mechanisms, including our own resources. And our invested projects spread diverse sectors like agriculture, we have the salinity tolerant crops in Vietnam, infrastructure like the disaster resilient urban planning and infrastructure, and energy, renewable energy, of course. And from this, we can see it reflect our dual focus on both mitigation and adaptation, and trying to leverage both public and private capital to address the urgent climate challenge facing in this region.
On the supply, we can look at this from the position of who are the ones governing this crediting mechanism. I think most well-known is our fellow VERRA gold standard. So they fall under the category, under the second box of the independent crediting mechanism. So they're usually your NGOs, non-profits. And then we have the big names, VERRA and Gold Standard. But there's also government crediting mechanisms. In the region, there's one from China, there's one from Thailand, and also Indonesia. So the government is the one who are setting the methodologies and deciding how this little market is supposed to be governed. But also up and coming, we have the last box that the UNFCCC Paris Agreement crediting mechanism, or we call it PACM, not Pac-Man, and Article 6.4. So most credits associated with the VCM, or voluntary carbon market, are outside of the Article 6 infrastructure and don't usually come with CAs or corresponding adjustments. Government crediting mechanisms are also usually not part of this, but theoretically, it is possible for your VERRA and Gold Standard or your maybe China CCERs to be a part of like an Article 6.2 approach and have CAs attached to them such that they can become what we call an ITMO. The third bucket of demand is actually from the aviation sector. So under the CORSIA scheme, airlines have to surrender their credits to meet the targets. And the technical advisory body determines whether or not credits from certain programs or methodologies are actually eligible. So some of these eligible credits come from the very well-known bodies like VERRA and Gold Standard. However, these credits need to come with corresponding adjustments so that there is no double claiming between the host country and the airline. Not many ITMOs or credits with corresponding adjustments exist. However, a key to this is actually cooperative approaches, which can be seen as a precursor to the future supply of ITMOs. Many countries with ambitious NDCs have gone out of their way to sign many agreements with the host countries so that they can buy credits from these countries for their NDC in future. So in the lead, there's like Japan that has signed many agreements under their JCM or joint crediting mechanism. But also in the lead, we have countries like Singapore, Switzerland, South Korea, and Norway also leading in terms of the number of agreements signed. So at IETA, we track all of these developments and we observe how the market is complex. We want the finance to go to countries where the cost of abatement is low, and so that more emissions reductions can be achieved. But at the end of the day, host countries also need to recognize the links between the demand and supply and acknowledge what buyers are looking for so that finance can flow to the right place.
The market has been in turbulence for at least 2 years in the past. The price was decreasing, was depressed, and confidence from buyers were lacking. In the carbon markets, last year we have 3 more compasses that we can refer to. The first one is the CCP, Core Carbon Principle by the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market, CORSIA, which Nadine had mentioned earlier, and the third, we have new labels that would suggest a project has greater integrity. Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market, or I should use the acronym ICVCM, is an international non-profit but multi-stakeholders governance body. So it's not influenced by standards. Standards apply to them. And this body came up with these 10 core carbon principles that would determine whether or not a standard is of high integrity or a particular methodologies are of high integrity. As of today, there are 6 standards internationally that has been approved as CCP eligibles. America, of course, you have ACR, and you have R3s, CAR, isometric, which is raised as niche in tech-based removals methodologies, of course, Gold Standard and VERRA ourselves. CORSIA is a another body, should I say. Now, to understand CORSIA, you have to understand the global greenhouse gas accounting. International flights. Now, those emissions related to international flights, they are not counted by any countries. CORSIA has its own assessment of standards and methodologies in terms of what they deem as high qualities and integrity. Right now, you have, again, 6 standards that's been approved for the first phase of CORSIA, which is the mandatory phase. You only see that there's one different name. Earlier, you have isometric. Here, you have Global Carbon Council. We also push out what we call labels. Labels that projects can pursue to show that the project has done beyond what is needed. And in this case, it's abacus. Abacus is not Swanpan. It's not that abacus. It's specifically for ARR project, afforestation, reforestation, and revegetation. Without going to details, but in essence is, an ARR projects, they must go beyond 4 areas: dynamic additionality, transparency, permanence, and they must avoid displacements of food productions. If they manage to do all 4 of these, they would be eligible to apply for the Hibiscus label. The first priority is still to mitigate, to reduce emissions. So you need to apply renewables, you should do it. But at the same time, you should also take actions on the emissions that you cannot mitigate by investing in carbon projects. And what is this in for you? You're helping countries to decarbonize. And when the environment is safeguarded, it's good for your business too. So there are many benefits for you to start today. And I encourage you to start taking actions, or at least understand the dynamics using these 3 compasses I've shared with you today.
But essentially, when we look at the data from Sylvera, we see that if you were to just look at methodology alone, you run into 2 problems. One is a false kind of positive problem, and one is a false kind of negative problem. You can say something like, oh, I'll go with, ARACM1, or I'll go with that methodology. All of that is good, right? And then you can see that obviously, even for that methodology, there's a very large spread of quality running all the way from, let me use my fancy laser again, from A all the way down to C or B grade, right? So there is a huge spread in methodologies. And I've just put up an example from RED and ARR here, but we do see the same pattern play out, in fact, across all of the projects that Sylvera has looked at, right? So methodologies, yes, you can compare methodologies, and if you're a Sylvera customer, you know that, in fact, we do. Some methodologies are designed to be more robust than others. That is true. That said, you can have methodologies that are really good, and then a project come out of that, built on the methodology, that because of execution failures, because of other local conditions on the ground, becomes a bad project. And then conversely, the other side of the problem is that you as a business, if you rule out all methodologies as a blanket, you can actually miss opportunities hiding in plain sight. Just a quick point on why quality matters. In general, we do see the average kind of jump in the price premium, why it's good for business, is that you see like an average of about 30% per rating band. And this comes not just from public data, but some of the private data that Sylvera has as well. That's what we refer to when we talk about proprietary supplier data. We do some matchmaking. We don't take any payments from buyers or suppliers for that matchmaking service, but we have basically some overview over some of the trades that they make anonymously. And so what that means is that these are real values. These are real values that people are willing to transact on. We will expect to see DCDR play more of an active role in the market moving forward. So it's going to be important to try and recognize what good quality looks like in durable CDR as we move on towards 2050 and 2030. Yes, just more proof points in terms of some of the supply that we're seeing on our catalog. And just one example of a big company like Microsoft. I think they account for about 80% of all the purchases of these CDR projects at this point.
Since the Kyoto era, the carbon markets have evolved and is still expanding and changing constantly. And learning by doing is one of the mottos in the carbon market. And I think such as a forum such as this will help us learn from each other, especially in the Asia region. It's one of the fastest growing market around the world, as Nadine noticed. I think Indonesia has starting their ETS. Thailand is preparing for it. We already have ETS in Korea, in China. China is expanding their ETS very soon. Japan is going from voluntary to a mandatory ETS pretty soon as well. Just noted, Taiwan might go from a carbon fee to an ETS very soon. So we see a very fast development in Asia, and I think it's in part due to CBAM. They want to level their pricing to match more closer to the EU. So in Asia, we're looking at, you see, linkage, talk about linkage. Carbon markets needs to link in order to scale up and provide liquidity, as well as to have more stability and parity in the prices. I think that helps everybody. So we see linkage starting from the EU. Now, EU is linked all the EU countries. We see linkage now in North America with California, Quebec, and now Washington. And even now in Southeast Asia, we're looking at business groups, associations that recently formed an alliance to link their carbon markets. So linkage is a very key to expand the market and to provide more reduction potential and also private capital. Yeah. And therefore, public-private partnership would be very key to this market development. And I think, for example, regional banks like ADB that have public money that would help to develop. I think World Bank was very instrumental in helping the CDM market really take off. So I think public money would definitely be very important, but eventually we'll need private capital. That's real money that comes in and help us scale up climate action worldwide. So I think Taiwan would probably also, we hope, play a vital role in this region in terms of private sector involvement, and then that'll give us more flexibility in meeting our target as well.